I did my best to ignore Beckett's nasty scowl glaring at me from across the table, and got up and began to move my way towards my mother in the audience. My mother, of course, waved me over and asked me to stand beside her and gestured that we should give a gentle bow. We did so, and as they continued to applaud and my mother slowly began to step away so we could have a private discussion, we made sure to wave and be as friendly as possible to all those spectating. Mrs. Sanderson, on the other hand, was applauding. However, she didn't quite seem as happy as she did when the event started. Young Beckett approached her as I had approached my mother, and even though I was walking away, I paid attention to the exchange. And from what I could tell, Mrs. Sanderson was not pleased with her son's performance, which did give me some measure of enjoyment. However, knowing that the consequences would most likely fall on me was somewhat of a double-edged sword, you might say. My mother and I finally reached a place in the garden party where few people had gathered. Most were still around the area of the competition, having quiet discussions, most likely about how things had went, how it reflected upon the families, whether their business alignments might change in the future. My mother kneeled down, holding me up by my shoulders and looking me in my eye. Her touch seemed softer, more gentle than most times, as was her expression, a slight smile. She softly placed her hand upon my face, stroking it gently. "You did very well, Regiment. You have made our family proud on this day. Your father will be honored to hear of your victory." "I'm sure of it," she said, bringing me in, giving me a gentle hug. It was actually somewhat disconcerting. This type of behavior wasn't normally like my mother. Usually, even when I succeeded at something, I didn't succeed well enough for her tastes or expectations. She would usually tell me things like, "You can do better, you must do better," and gentle hugs and congratulations were not usually part of her repertoire. But it did feel good, warm, and for a moment, I found myself lost in the warmth of that hug, not concerning myself with whether I would receive punishment for acting out of turn or speaking out. It was comforting, even if it was only for the moment, as she embraced me, placing her cheek against mine. My mother finally released me from the hug and stood to her feet. "Okay, you can go play now," she said, gesturing towards the child section, turning me and giving me a pat on the back of the head. And as I obliged her, walking back towards the child section, I found myself for the first time in a while with a genuine smile. The feeling that she was proud, that I had done good, made me feel quite well. I find myself reminiscing of the hug as I walk towards the child section, slowly bringing my hand to my cheek, remembering my mother's warmth. I found my way back to the table that I was sitting at before, and already waiting for me was Eliza and young Evan. Evan seemed happy to see me and had a smile on his face. Eliza, on the other hand, was still pouting, probably still angry about the category of questions that she got asked. "Good job, Regiment," Evan said. "Your mom looked really happy." "I really think she was," I replied, still rubbing my cheek and trying to remember the hug. "Yeah, but Beckett didn't look happy at all," Eliza announced. "If I were you, I'd be on the lookout for him and his little gang of thugs." I sighed. "Trust me, you don't have to remind me of that," I replied, beginning to put my hand through my hair, scratch my head a little bit, trying to come up with maybe some way of getting out of it. But as much as I thought about it, there wasn't any favorable option. He was upset, and I was going to have to deal with it. So I figured I might as well enjoy myself for the time being, my short-lived victory, though it may be. In the distance, I heard the announcer begin to cry out, "In a few minutes, we shall begin the adult section of our events for the night with a wine tasting competition. Is your palate truly refined and discerning? We shall find out." For the next hour or so, myself, Eliza, and Evans tried to pass the time talking amongst ourselves, passing ideas back and forth between how, of course, we would make business work once we were adults, ways that we could help each other, and that our businesses could coincide for mutual profit. We had a few random jokes about Beckett and what he would most likely be up to. Eliza, as always, thought the appropriate option would be to put him in a cannon and fire it. That seemed to be her general solution to just about any type of problem, and it always seemed to get a chuckle. But before long, our jovial conversation was interrupted by a pat on my back. As I turned around, there was Beckett Sanderson, along with about 4 of his goons. "Congratulations on your victory, Worthington," Beckett said, crossing his arms, looking down at me. "Me and my friends wanted to thank you properly. There's a spot right over here where we can have some privacy." "Why don't you leave him alone?" Eliza exclaimed. "It was just a game. Why don't you mind your own beeswax, twerp?" one of Sanderson's friends announced as they began to push me towards the outside portion of the gardens. I knew where this was going, and as usual, I had no choice but to just go along with it. Intoxicated adults don't pay much attention, and even if I did try to call out for help or get the attention of an adult, it would look poorly on my family to admit any kind of physical superiority. So I began walking to the outside portion of the gardens, occasionally being pushed or shoved by Sanderson or one of his friends. Past some of the trimmed and edged bushes and tree line, there was a clearing with a small brook beside it. This was the place they had chosen, and as we came to a stop, I felt a forceful push on my back, forcing me to the ground. "I bet you think you're real smart showing me up like that, huh, Worthington?" Beckett said, beginning to circle like a vulture who had spotted a wounded animal. I tried to get back up. "All I did was play the game," I said calmly, trying to maintain composure even in this situation. As usual, only moments after I got to my feet, I was pushed back down again, and again. The process would repeat many times before they got bored of watching me hit the ground. "Why do you think this is so funny?" I asked, trying to get to my feet again. "Because it is," Sanderson replied, pushing me back down again. "You think you're all high and mighty in the Worthington family, but the truth is you're nothing. Your mother isn't even from a prestigious family. She's just some whore that your father picked off the street." I continued to try to get to my feet, scowling, trying as hard as I could not to show it. "All we're doing is putting you back in the dirt where you belong," one of Beckett Sanderson's friends said. "All you are is commoner trash that has the gall to stand it with the rest of us and pretend that we're equals. And even more insulting than that, you pretend you're actually better than us." "I never said any of that," I replied, trying to brush some of the grass and dirt off of my jacket. "You're not even fit to wear those clothes." "Regiment," Beckett Sanderson said. "In fact, just hand them over. Give me your jacket," he said, demandingly. "No," I replied, as usual when he made his silly little demands. "What did you say to me?" Beckett said, pushing me to the ground again. "When a superior tells you to do something, you do it. Now give me your jacket." "No," I replied again, trying to pull myself back to my feet. "This is my jacket, not yours, and I'm not giving it to you. Just like I'm not giving you my pants, and I'm not giving you my shoes. We've played this game 100 times, and the answer is always the same. No. So much pride from you garbage people," Sanderson said, kicking dirt at me. His friends obliged him and started kicking dirt of their own in my direction. I tried to cover my eyes and mouth, keep it from getting in. "Oh, look what we have here. Just the way I'd expect to find a weakling," we heard a female voice announce from a short distance away. The others stopped kicking dirt on me, at least for the moment, turning to face the female voice. As I shook off what I could of the dirt and tried to stand to my feet, I looked to see a girl with long blonde hair, a flowing yellow dress to match, adorned with yellow roses, and a belt decorated with them as well. My first reaction was surprise. I really didn't expect to see her out here. I definitely didn't see her in the children's section of the party. Had she recently arrived? Why wasn't she part of the contest? It was Alice Wallengard, a friend of my mother's daughter. My second thought, after realizing who it was I have no idea how this is going to go. Sorry, girlie, this is a private party. Get lost, Beckett Sanderson said, trying to wave her away. Alice simply continued to walk forward, her hands behind her back, casually strolling closer and closer. And why exactly would I listen to a weakling like you? Alice replied, smiling. Who else but a weakling targets someone half his size and brings 4 other people to help him do it? If your mind is weak, perhaps you should pick up a book. Or is your mind too weak to do that? Who do you think you are? Beckett shouted, walking closer to Alice, only to be greeted by a punch directly in the nose, after which she rapidly gave him a kick, forcing him to the ground. Beckett Sanderson's nose began to bleed. Who do you think you are? You can't do this to me. You're going to what? Alice replied, closing in the distance on him, leaning down while he was on the ground, still smiling widely. I suppose you and your friends could beat me up, but I highly doubt a bunch of boys beating up a helpless girl would look too favorable. You could also run and tell on me. Tell everyone at the party that you were beaten up by a girl. I highly doubt your mother or father is going to be proud of either one of those situations. So, which is it going to be? Are you going to be the boy who beat up a helpless girl, or the one who got beat up by a helpless girl? As long as you stick around here, those appear to be your options. So, which is it? Alice said, grinning to ear to ear, playing with the blonde strings of hair that hang off her head, seeming as happy and content in this moment as I think I've ever seen her. At this moment, I don't think I need to explain that Alice Wallengard is out of her mind. Quite frankly, if I had to pick one word that described her properly, it would be terrifying. Beckett Sanderson scowled, trying to rub the blood from his nose. He got up to his feet, holding his nose. You haven't heard the last of this, he exclaimed, waving his friends away. We may be out of here, but don't think this is done, Beckett exclaimed as him and his friends left, me and Alice alone in the clearing. I breathed a sigh of relief, finally being left alone by Beckett and his little friends, but now unsure of if I was safe alone with Alice.